big, big vibe all the time. Yeah. I'm going to remember to tweet. There we go. I have remembered to tweet, and then I'm going to remember to tell the Discord. And they will politely funnel in. Or else. It's so much power having a Discord because you just at everyone. And then it pops up like, are you sure you want to at all these people? It's like, yes.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, it rules.
I always like in my I had to create a specific like role in my server so that I didn't like ping everyone for like, hey guys, I'm going to be streaming a card game for the next 2 hours. I'm sure that's why you're all here, right?
Yeah.
You want to, are you sure you want to at 300 people to go watch you to play a card game?
Yeah. Listen, it's your Discord. There, you are the law in there. You can do whatever you want.
True. It's very true.
That's my policy. I think in my Discord, I believe the first rule is yes. Rule 1. I rule with an iron fist. That's the first rule. So I want to make sure people understand what they're agreeing to.
I see. So you're playing Slay the Spire as we conversate, I see.
Yeah, I figure I should have something going on visually, and this is a game that I could play in my sleep, so it won't take my brain away from the conversation at all. I think that's a good move.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That's sick. It's a good video game.
I love it. I've put hundreds of hours into it, and yet I can still go back to it anytime. It's a winning recipe, the delicious recipe.
Yeah, I haven't played very much of it. I've played like 5 hours of it, but it's anything with that sort of like deck building mechanics is always a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I want more deck building in games in general. It rules. I love it.
Yeah, it's good. It's just good core gameplay loop. Yeah.
Exactly. So it looks like a few people have moseyed on into the old streamer-rooney. So hello everyone in Streamsville. I am here with the Sarah Zedig.
Wow.
Yes.
Incredible.
I say the because I do not know a single other Sarah Zedig.
Yeah, a friend of mine yesterday was like, "Hey, I know you're working on a new video. Did you already release one about the Onceler fandom?" And I went and like, "No, that's Sarah Z. That's a different one."
Oh yeah, which one of you? which one of you was first? I feel like there should be like a turf war.
I think she was first. Well, I think I actually haven't gone back and looked at the timings because I forget that I did videos like that go back before when I sort of restarted things in 2018 or whatever. But I know like I was going by Sarah Z for a bit, and then I was looking at changing my Patreon name from LTAS to Sarah Z, and then I looked up Sarah Z and I found her, and I was like, "You taking my thing from me!" And I tracked her down, watched some of her videos, and was like, "Ah, dang it, you're actually good at this." And then I fake started beef on Twitter.
So if she was shitty at it, do you think then you would have tried to start something?
I mean, look, if she was like yeah, I mean, if she was like a makeup tutorial vlogger or a sports vlogger or some sort of like other form of YouTuber, then it would have been one thing. But she's like she's in approximately the same sphere of topic that I do.
So she was
And-
spared because she's not a prep, is what I'm hearing. She's not a prep YouTuber,
Yes.
so she deserves rights. I'm glad that we agree on that standard.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about the CHAZ.
Mm-hmm.
How because I know you were there a bit. What obviously I'll trust your judgment for what should and shouldn't be said in the first place. But like, what were you? What sort of stuff were you doing there? Were you just kind of chilling, or were you like a bigger part of it, or?
I didn't really do a ton on the ground. I just went there basically every day that it existed.
Okay.
After a certain point, I helped out with the co-op a couple of times. I stayed overnights once or twice, and I and that involved sort of like walking around, picking up trash, patrolling the borders.
Yeah.
Basically, just sort of making sure there's eye lines for everybody. But other than that, I was mostly an observer. Like I know some people who are like, I'm press. I'm just sort of hands off. Like I wouldn't go that far for myself because I while I was like an outside observer, sort of trying to watch this place a little bit scientifically, I also am very biased, and I wasn't trying to be objective at all about like. I don't know. Like I knew what I wanted to. I have an opinion about what I want this place to be.
Of course, and we will most certainly get to that because I think there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, but no, I mostly what I did is walk around and I had a sort of route that I would take every day that I went there to sort of see how things had evolved, because I noticed there were a couple of little spots that kept changing every day in like interesting ways. And
okay.
And then as I was, and then I would basically just, stop and talk to people to hear how they felt about it, if they felt safe, or how does it feel that this place exists? What is that sort of thing.
And was there like a general consensus from the people you were talking to, or was it quite varied?
So it's it's difficult to say. I would say like the consistent things would be pretty much the whole time that I was there. The most consistent thing I heard was, I feel safer here than I have felt in the city in a long time.
Right.
And even I can't tell you how many people I walked by who are like skeptics who would come here and be like, well, Fox News said there was going to be people walking around with AK-47s. And but instead I had to tell 3 different people, no, thank you. I already have a bottle of water.
Right.
So there were a lot of people sort of like flummoxed by like, well, I came here hoping for the thrill of having a warlord, threaten my life. But instead, I got some free food and signed a petition to tax Amazon.com.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we all are after. We're trying to get threatened by warlords every day out here.
Well, yeah, 2020 is such a boring time.
Yeah, nothing's going on. So it's like we are thrill-seeking, and as per usual, the social justice left can't even produce a fucking warlord. I'll blow this potion.
Yeah.
No, it is frustrating because we do try hard to produce warlords, but so a lot of people were coming then, really buying into the media narrative, and coming to realize that it's mostly just people chilling.
Yeah, I would say for some reason there's a part of me that's like sticking at media narrative,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't even know. Maybe that is right. Maybe there's so many little pedantic things that I've been like circling my head around. Sometimes I grab on things and like, actually, that's nothing. Never mind. Um, but basically, like, I think a lot of folks came not sure what to expect. I think everybody assumed, most of the people who live in Seattle or like in the area probably came there expecting like, a lot of people are saying it's this hyper violent place. I
Mm-hmm.
really doubt it. Um, I think everybody was just curious because it was such a weird spectacle, and uh, yeah, generally speaking, whether they were on the fence or not, like I never came away. I never heard anybody walking away being like, "Oh wow, it's as bad um, as they made it out to be." There's like a Tucker Carlson piece
Mm-hmm.
from within its first week where like one of it's like showing a video of like this lawless wasteland, and it has like dramatic music playing and everything.
I think I've seen the one. I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's so funny is that like they show close-ups of all of these people who I talked to,
Mm-hmm.
who are like super normal. Like there's like this one guy's like twirling a stick, and it's like, yeah, it's just that guy. That's just that guy. That's what that guy does.
He's
He's
twirling
also
a
been
stick.
there. Yeah, like oh, this lawless wasteland. Like, what's he gonna do? But also, he's been there every day, and he's one of the people that folks rely on. Like, there's a lot of people like that. Like, it's I don't know. What I feel like is whether the biggest lesson for me, that has like affected a lot of how I see the protest movement happening right now, is that generally speaking, the narrative doesn't matter, and the opinions of people who don't live there don't matter.
Yeah. Because
drop my pen. Yeah.
it's cool. I
Sorry,
mean,
go ahead.
that's a really good lesson to take away, because I think that it can be very easy for people to get a little caught up in what like randos online are saying, but like
Yes.
a lot of those randos don't live there. A lot of those randos probably don't even fucking live in the country. Like I'm always commenting about U.S. politics. I live in the UK. Like who fucking cares? Like, I'm simply not there, and I think it can be
Right.
easy to forget that fact when you look at a comment section.
Yeah. Well, and also, Twitter has become a really important tool for organizing, just because of, spontaneity and everything. But like, I think one thing I noticed very, very early on is there's like this omnipresent fact that like the Proud Boys are coming.
Right.
And every single day, there were a couple of group chats that I was in. Every time there was like a handful of new people, they would be like, "Oh, I saw this post on Instagram. I don't know how credible it is, but it's better to be safe than sorry." And it's like Instagram post of 30 to 50 Proud Boys seen loading up in northern Seattle. They're ready for bear. And it's like, no, they never show up. They're never there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, in the protests, like the night that they actually abandoned the precinct before CHAZ became real, the whole thing. This gets into like if you want like a short history of CHAZ.
Yeah, go for it.
That's a separate thing. Okay, so. Like everywhere else in the country, all these protests have been going on in Seattle. At this point, this was in early June, that protests in Seattle had been very heated for a bit. I think that not too long before the SPD abandoned the East Precinct. somebody like drove into the protesters and like got out and shot somebody and then disappeared into the line of cops. That person, like their brother is a cop. Like they're so they like, there's a picture of the guy walking towards the cops, giving the cops the thumbs up, and they let him in, and he was like arrested on, you know, nothing charges and let out on bail the next day. And it's like, yeah, outside agitators. Anyway, so it wasn't, you know, there'd been blood spilled. There's a lot of like, you know, and the person who was shot survived.
Good. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, that person was shot in the arm. So they're fine.
Okay.
But like, not long. So it was within like the same time frame as that. SPD abandoned the East Precinct, and everybody knew it was a trap because they didn't need to do this. You know, this was right after in Minneapolis they had burned the third precinct there, which was a thing. Like that was a genuinely like a beleaguered police force abandoning their precinct because they just couldn't they couldn't defend it anymore. This was not that. Like SPD was not under threat of any kind in the same way, and like I don't know, it was such an obvious trap from day one. What do you figure the rationale behind the trap was? Like, what were they hoping you were gonna do? I think they were hoping for people to try to start a fire. I genuinely think what they were wanting to do is create a circumstance wherein, because this was also, I believe, right after the Seattle City Council passed like a ban on chemical weapons.
Right.
Which now, of course, the federal government has said you can't do that. Yeah, I think that came out just today. But so I think what they were trying to do was create the circumstances, like literally for their own Reichstag fire, where they were going to use that as a justification for extreme retaliatory force, because they really wanted to arrest as many people as possible, like they did after they cracked down on CHAZ.
Yeah.
And like the thing is, you know, at that moment, protests, the people were largely in support of the protests, and so they couldn't just keep doing shows of extraordinary force without, you know, inviting more people to show up. So I think that they were trying to, you know, make something where it's like, see, they tried to burn down police property. They're heathens, every single one of them.
Right.
And instead, you had this wild circumstance where you had a bunch of armed anarchists protecting a police precinct from the police, because there were literally plainclothes cops on the ground trying to start fires. And you had anarchists like running up to them and like shooing them away.
Right.
It's very bizarre.
So, all right. So you had them coming in trying to initiate the event that they hoped you guys would do on your own, basically.
Oh yeah. Like the thing is, I wasn't, to be clear, I wasn't on the ground, but I was watching sort of like an omni stream of multiple streams of these events as they were going on, and I was like talking to a lot of people. But it seemed like the on the ground consensus that, oh, this is a trap, it was so universal. Like there were people with megaphones like on the ground speaking in front of the precinct, saying like, you know, this is a trap, don't spring the bait, you know, don't take the bait, we gotta whatever. The fact that was so that seemed so like stated and restated, that the idea of anybody genuinely trying to start a fire is like, nah, you got to be a cop. Like maybe one or two of them is like an instigator, but it seemed like because later on also during the time of CHAZ, I talked to people who are like, yeah, somebody yesterday was trying to start a fire at the precinct, and I saw them this morning walking out of the precinct. So it was like, genuinely like it is basically just it's one of those facts that's like I probably couldn't prove it in a court of law, but it's pretty well known that they're like, yeah, the cops were trying to start their own fires.
Yeah, I mean the historical precedent for that kind of behavior is so overwhelming that I think it would be pretty shocking if they weren't trying to do something like that at the very least.
Yeah.
So how effectively do you think the people at CHAZ handled agitators of whatever kind?
I think they handled them a little bit too effectively. I think so. This is the most important thing to understand CHAZ is the fact that the East Precinct was abandoned for a trap that never got sprung, and that CHAZ as a discrete sort of bordered area came to exist as an accident. It wasn't like a ton of protesters going into this place deliberately trying to make an autonomous zone. It was an accident of circumstance.
Right.
And so the result of that is like this I've been struggling to figure out a good way to describe it, but basically it became this sort of ideological battleground of multiple forces tearing the whole place apart because there wasn't a leading ideology, I guess. But so the reason why I bring that up is because there is no sense that this was an explicitly communist project or an explicitly anarchist project. You had gardens and tent city and the co-ops show up and like medical tents and everything. But everybody was sort of organizing on their own. There didn't seem to be any sort of real communication. And the result of that is that people could just kind of come in and be like, oh yeah, I'm a leader. And nobody could prove you otherwise because there's no central anything.
Right.
And so what happened, the thing that I ultimately ascribe as the death of CHAZ is the fact that liberal voices were able to come in and co-opt the energy of CHAZ.
Right.
And they managed to get in front of people and get them to believe them when they said, this isn't about the cops, this is about racism. Our problem isn't with the cops, it's with racists. And
right.
The result of that was like the kind of behavior you're seeing at other places of like, black bloc protester, breaking a window, and then you've got, 3 people in Black Lives Matter shirts, like grabbing them and throwing them to the cops, that sort of thing.
Christ.
Yeah, that sort of thing didn't really happen in CHAZ, and it did happen like in the protests beforehand, and there were a couple of times where it got close to that, where it was like, folks trying to do any sort of property damage were roundly shouted down. And it's like the police were still in the precinct. They left a TV on. They were watching The Simpsons for a long time. And they like, I don't know. basically, like that's my big feeling with CHAZ is that they let the liberals take over too easily. Like a bunch of people who have now been revealed to be like either cops sympathizers or friends of cops or just actually literally cops. Like because it was all about identity politics rather than class politics or any sort of coherent ideology beyond just Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Like this is why it's so frustrating because there is a point. It's the classic liberal problem of never going farther than the first sort of speed bump as far as like challenging yourself. So, we've got to raise black voices. Doesn't matter if they're like literal landlords.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we want to hear black voices over white voices, and it's like, yes, that's true, but there are also black landlords and black cops, and just saying Black Lives Matter does not give you a good framework for dealing with that.
Yeah,
and the result is that it just sort of consistently got derailed, and there were a handful of people, like, yeah, just it. I think that they were too good at policing that behavior. I think a little bit more. I kept saying, like my friends and I were every time we would go back, it would be like, all right, we're doing good. This is looking good, but we got to take a building. This place, if you don't have actual shelter, if you're just going to be, you can't just sleep on the damn ground.
Yeah.
And expect everybody is going to be like, okay, for doing this. And of course, the thing that we expected to happen did happen, where people got tired. Nobody was getting paid for this, and people still have to pay bills. And nobody had like a comfortable place to sleep, so it's like folks stopped showing up. And once there was a manpower shortage, that's when the cops started like making their moves.
Yeah.
Like I keep thinking, like, if there's all these like vacant apartment buildings in the area. This is a heavily gentrified part of Seattle. So there's all these like under construction buildings and I don't know, multiple vacant hotels right there.
Yeah.
I just kept thinking, like, if you had taken just like one of those, with everything else going on there, like somebody could conceivably, if they have actual shelter right there, somebody could conceivably like quit their job and live there and then not have to worry about food because there are people cooking constantly nearby, giving away free food.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you actually want to make a zone that is autonomous in any sort of meaningful sense, and you want people to stay there to keep it alive, you got to give them a place to live that's not a fucking tent on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. So, and you're saying that the liberal presence there maybe served to discourage people from taking that step?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Every time it felt like people were my estimate of the actual like ideological leaning of the general crowd in CHAZ has changed a lot as time has gone on. I used to think that it was probably like close to a 50-50 split between people who are more liberal versus people who are more communist.
Okay.
But now I think it skews a much further to the left. And the problem is it's not what the majority thinks, it's what the loudest minority thinks somehow. In that, like, or at least when it comes to liberals. I don't know how you get over this exactly, but like there were a number of times where like shit, I lost my train of thought. I what was I saying? I'm sorry.
You were saying that it seems like it skewed much more towards actual like communists, but that the liberals were such a loud.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So I think what am I trying to say here? What it feels like now is that there are these sort of liberal organizer types who are very good at coming into this movement and derailing it.
Yeah.
Using it to make some money, quite literally through like Venmo donations and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there isn't enough because it's sort of like early 1900s territory where people have the energy of I want to do something, but they're not sure what's okay, and they're not sure if there's just like a lot of uncertainty.
Definitely.
And
yes.
and if you had a more explicitly communist project at the heart of the place, then the liberals might not have been as good at like co-opting people or like getting people to stand down. But it was like every time somebody was suggesting like, hey, maybe we take the precinct and turn it into a community center or something, or maybe we take some of these buildings because they're not being occupied anyway. Anytime those ideas started to get expressed, it was like somebody would take the speakerphone away from them, or they'd get booed down. And it really was like a master class of just like the right people all the right places controlling the conversation at all times. I could be very conspiratorial about it if I wanted to, because it feels like I mean, considering so many of the people that I had kept an eye on from the sidelines as like very clearly like liberal elements that were a problem.
Yeah.
So many of them have since like taken pictures with cops and posted them on Twitter and been like, oh, see, they're not all bad. It's
well,
like, yeah.
Frankly, with everything we know about the past like 100 years of like counterintelligence, I think that you would be foolish not to be conspiratorial, not to be sort of looking over every corner being like, is something going on here? Because there's something going on somewhere. In any protest, in anything that's gotten to the point where they are taking territory, the cops aren't just chilling. Like, no, they're doing something. So, I don't think it should be. I don't think it should be discouraged to have a very skeptical eye when people are taking actions that it seems would benefit the cops more than everyone else.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat that I want to touch on, but just before that, some Zozo says, I feel like you need someone to literally not let them take the megaphone, like physically stop them.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into the question, which was, I got to scroll back up. How do you think a central leadership would have / could have been established, even as just a liberal deterrent? And what do you? And I would add to that, like, what do you think the importance of that is in something like CHAZ?
Yeah. So this is a tough question to answer because I don't have like the solution, and I think,
of course,
one of the things I learned is that this place is constantly surprising me, and any advice or like fact that I might have about like how it should have gone or whatever, it's like that people could prove me wrong instantly.
Right.
I think the way that I see it, if there had been a central group of some kind, or even, See, I'm not even sure because there is an extent to which the leaderlessness of these protest movements is good, and the part of what makes these things so unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
But also, that also makes them very easily co-opted and infiltrated. I think for me, if what you would need is something like there is an AZ recently established. I can't remember. I think it was on the East Coast. I can't remember where exactly, but they put out a statement like immediately, and it was from a central organizational entity.
Right.
I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer because for so many reasons. I think if you had more a sense of like, I think generally you just need more open communists on the ground, and there needs to be there needed to be some sort of central organizational structure so that you had people at the usual spots able to help where possible, because you're not going to be able to take the autonomous zone thing. You're not going to be able to actually make it autonomous from everybody who lives there.
Yeah.
And you can't keep everybody out who you disagree with necessarily.
Yeah.
But you also have to be able to get those people to shut the fuck up or go. And I think I don't know. I think that there needed to be the handful of organizers who I did come to trust. They were very allergic to ever being having any sort of leadership role attributed to them.
Right. And
they all seemed very wary of taking extra steps, doing the next thing. I don't know. It's hard to answer because you kind of need you need what you really need is a communist party. You need a group that has already existed a long time before CHAZ started.
Yeah.
That gets people on the same page about what our actions do and what they imply.
Okay.
Instead you have a bunch of people who, the furthest left they've ever been is being pro-Bernie.
Yeah.
And this is probably the first time that they've been to a protest in their lives. So it's a very sort of undereducated sort of movement, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that brings up a problem, and Dr. Rue in the chat just mentioned an organized affinity group or vanguard, and I think I think that a lot of people, for reasons that I do think are valid and merit serious discussion, a lot of people are very dubious about the prospect of a vanguard or some party coming in and being like, no, we know how to do this. This is our show.
Right.
But I think it needs to be understood that you at some point somebody has to, or not some individual, but a group has to be able to make a decision such as, are we going to let cops into this space or no?
Right.
Are we gonna, are we going to hold buildings or no? Decisions eventually have to be made. And if you refuse to get together and make them, then I think it seems, from where I'm standing in CHAZ, that the liberals will show up and make them for you. And they will always be working in the interests of the status quo, which in this case is the police retaining control. Yeah. So it doesn't have to literally be the fucking Bolsheviks, but there has to be.
Well,
there simply must
exactly.
be
like,
something.
Yeah, I've said we need a vanguard party of some kind, and a couple of times people have been like, well, hold on, not a vanguard. And like, I don't, bro, I don't care, man. I don't care. Like, I'm not my ideology, like my actual political affiliation is, I just want, I want shit to happen. I don't care. Like, I just want it. I want.
Well, a lot of people have a very historically narrow understanding of what a vanguard is. Like, anarchist projects have had vanguards. The Black Army was a fucking vanguard. In Catalonia, they had a vanguard. Like, it's not like literally just Lenin. So,
Right.
and in this case, the role that a vanguard would play, or call it what you will, just any kind of organized group. The role that it would play would basically, it wouldn't even be I wouldn't think, to take control of this whole thing, but just to be like, okay, we need to lay some fucking ground rules before some liberals come in and say, actually, we're friends with the police. Have you considered that? Like, if you don't have a barrier to that happening, you've got fucking nothing. So like, it's
Well, yeah. The thing is, there were a handful of people, who kept being like there's one particular person who let the cops in, where like a whole wall of people, like 2 cops tried to walk in CHAZ, and a bunch of protesters like ran over and blocked them and pushed them out. They just walked around the other side of CHAZ and somebody just let them in.
Yeah.
A huge crowd gathered for that, like this confrontation with the person who let them in. That guy who let the cops in was still there after that. Like, he was still present at CHAZ and people still listened to him.
See,
and
that's
like,
a huge problem.
Exactly. Like, that's the point. What we need is somebody. There needs to be some sort of like, yes, this guy in particular is a problem, and he can't, like, there needs to be this sort of like active, progressive deplatforming of people who you immediately know are like instigators in this way.
Yeah,
and
I think
the fact that wasn't there. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that highlights a really key a contradiction in sort of figuring out how to organize these things, right? You need to. Something like this could only really have come up organically. You can't just go in with your 5 communist buddies and be like, we declare this an autonomous zone. It won't. It's nonsense. Right. You have to be able to retain that level of organic that level of organic development. And I would say in this situation, the leaderlessness of it was an advantage, because the cops couldn't just like nab 1 or 2 people and you're fucked. And that's super fucking important.
Yes.
So that's kind of one side of this tension, but the other side of the tension is very much, you need to be able to expel people. You need to be able to say, no, this guy can't just come here and be part of this. And that requires exercising a certain degree of criticism and authority. So the tension is between these 2 poles, and I think that a lot of people are scared of trying to kind of resolve that contradiction, right? Of sort of looking at these 2 things and sitting down and saying, okay, how can we achieve our goals without sacrificing both of these things as much as possible? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds an awful lot like you're describing the paradox of free speech. Don't tolerate intolerance. Basically, like, in order to actually have a space that is beneficial to everybody, you have to be willing to not tolerate speech and actions which, whether explicitly or inherently, impinge on people's right to exist as they please.
Yeah, it's like that, but for liberalism.
well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, that's the thing, is that you have to have the ability to look at what they're saying and see the actual material ramifications of what they're saying and how those will echo down the line. and see like, oh, this is when a liberal speaks, they're speaking for the cops, which means they're speaking as a figurehead of white supremacy.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think there was also a lot of fear about like, we don't want to seem like there's this general sense of like, oh, we can't, we got to do this the right way. We don't want to seem like those protesters or whatever.
Right.
And there was like so much fear about optics. And this is something that genuinely seemed to be a conflict on the ground. Although I'm sure the liberal element did not make it better. Is this like constant fear of like, how does this look? Is this going to make us look bad? And I don't know. I think that the whole like, but the we gotta the media is going to lie about us if we don't do this the right way. And it's like, well, they're already lying about us.
Yeah,
is the thing. Is like everybody just seems to misunderstand. Like, no, they're already doing that though. They're already lying.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter. Like, the fact that people keep just, I don't know. It's just really frustrating. It's really frustrating. People kept feeling like, we got to make sure we don't look bad. But what does that mean? What does that actually mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, nothing looks worse than not fucking existing anymore, and not having achieved your goals.
Right.
So it seems like, and I've gathered that there was definitely a real hesitation to put any real structure into this. So yes. It sounds like, I guess it sounds like without experienced organizers, a lot of people were afraid to make a move in the event that it could become their fault if something goes wrong, and then the media, takes it for a fucking spin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody was spooked. It's like the combination of, I don't want to be the person cited by Fox News or MSNBC as the outside agitator that, brought down hell on CHAZ. And also, I don't want to get caught here by the Proud Boys who are always already here.
Yeah, sure, sure.
So there's just so much outside, there's so much propaganda, and I don't know. I don't know. The whole thing is so much.
All of that to me just sort of screams out the necessity of a bit of structure.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
it's important for people to understand that even a completely horizontal structure is a structure. There's a difference between leaderlessness and structurelessness, and I've certainly. It seems to me that CHAZ really suffered from confusing the two and engaging in a lot of structurelessness. And that story you told a minute ago of blocking the cops at one entrance, they go around and somebody lets them in at the fucking other one, that's what you get when you have no structure, when you can't... tyranny of structurelessness, Blastoise in the chat, exactly. When you can't enforce the most basic line, when you can't get everyone to agree, okay, we do X, Y, and Z, when it's just a bunch of people fucking milling around, the cops will win every time. You've got nothing at that point. You just got a bunch of people hanging out on a street.
Yes, yeah. And that was a constant thing of like, everybody's treating this like Coachella. It's not Coachella. And there was especially towards the end, I saw a lot of folks tagging on the streets and on the walls like, remember why you're here. This is not your summer vacation, that sort of thing.
Right.
there is a question that I wanted to answer that's from AHA Sitcoms.
Oh,
What
sure.
do you think be the ideal circumstances under which to set up an AZ? You mentioned earlier that the precinct being abandoned was a trap that was never sprung. And I doubt that the cops are going to make that mistake a second time. Surely, next AZ project would have to be more premeditated than this. So, I think, yeah. So it's difficult to figure out because I think like Kay said, you can't just show up with your friends and say, I declare this an autonomous zone. It has to emerge organically to some extent. The question is how how do you strategically build one while taking advantage of a moment. And so we've seen in other places, I want to say it's Pittsburgh. I can't remember exactly where, but there's a housing authority there that has like closed a lot of houses and has this like public property that they just closed off. So they made a houseless encampment there at this like empty lot owned by I think the Pittsburgh Housing Authority, and they declared it like this is our autonomous zone.
Oh.
And the cops showed up and tried to clear them out, and I think I know that the cops more or less cleared them out once, but I think they came back.
That's a baller strategy. Sort of just keep coming back.
Well, yeah, exactly. But so like you'll see something like that somewhere else on the East Coast. There is a hospital owned by this billionaire who has kept it closed because he wants to sell it, but nobody is buying, and like the court sued to like keep the place open, and he won that lawsuit, I guess. So there's just a closed hospital in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
And you had a bunch of people like setting up for COVID testing out front there and like trying to occupy it. And then you had the cops showing up saying, hey, get away from that hospital.
Right.
But from stuff like that, there were talks of like, we're going to make this hospital an autonomous zone. And I think we're seeing this happen because there have been a couple that have shown up and then disappeared in Portland, and like it's really hard to keep track of these things because I think mainstream media in general is bored of protests.
Oh yeah, they've completely just dropped it.
Yeah, and the other thing is I think that social media sites have tooled their algorithms to make it harder for that stuff to sort of come across everybody's timelines. So the result is much more information than there already was, and just like general sort of silence. And yeah, I don't know. I think even without that, like there have been so there might be autonomous zones elsewhere that have been going for a while that I just don't know about. Because,
you mentioned a couple in Portland. I've heard people talk about the idea of that. Do you know what's happened with any of those?
Well, so I know right around when CHAZ finally did fall, I know that there was one that was declared in Portland, and it lasted, I think, a day. This is the thing, is that I don't think any of them have had the longevity of CHAZ. And I think like it's more a spirit type thing where everybody, I think what a lot of folks are trying to do is like, we want to give this another shot. We want to do this right this time. Mm-hmm. And so they're taking the opportunities to like, okay, this is going to be our next CHAZ. And then, the cops show up and knock them out. And so So I think that's kind of what you're going to be seeing a lot of, is like, we declare this an autonomous zone, and then most of them will not last very long. But I think the fact that it's on everybody's minds is like, yeah, we need to. I think the idea of creating a sort of supportive little commune within a city is enough of an aspirational thing for a lot of people that, like, now that they've seen it's possible. It feels like it's happening a lot more. It's just a matter of, having it last. I don't know.
Do you, in your opinion, because as Blastoise just said in the chat, said I think that maybe CHAZ formed more organically, and any attempt to recreate it is going to be kind of fruitless. I'm not necessarily saying that I think that's the case, but do you think this is the strategy that we should be, or at least in American cities right now, that they should be going for? Do you think this is a useful pursuit?
Well, so I don't know. My thing is, when it comes to, like, is it the strategy? I don't think there is such a thing. My philosophy is that any successful revolutionary movement will support a diversity of tactics.
Certainly, yeah.
I think every city has to evaluate its own material circumstances and recognize what will work and what won't work there. CHAZ did come to exist organically as a result of material circumstances on the ground. And so there will not be another thing like CHAZ in quite the same way, because you had cops abandon the precinct and protesters basically recommissioning the barricades to block off the streets, and then the cops just sort of like playing chicken with them, and then eventually not knowing what to do because the protesters just refused to burn the place down. Right. I don't think there's not going to be a circumstance like that necessarily, and I don't know how you make one like it's not just a matter of, like, making an autonomous zone. It's also a matter of finding a place for one that is defendable and sustainable. And CHAZ was in a sort of like perfect position, and as like in the heart of gentrified Seattle. So everybody who lived there is pretty rich. But also it's like everybody on the ground is like, working class or houseless. I don't know. I don't know how possible it is to recreate it elsewhere. I just know that, like, it's a project, and I think for a lot of folks, like, when it comes to what do I do with this moment, I could go out and get gassed and beaten up by cops, and that's not really it. You start to feel kind of hopeless when it comes to, like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know how I can help. I don't know, because you're just like throwing yourself against all of this police abuse and nothing is coming of it. All your friends are getting arrested and sent to the hospital. I think when it's like, at least the idea of, like, let's try to create an autonomous zone, like that's a tangible goal to focus on, regardless of whether or not anything actually comes of it. I don't know. I think it's important to look at these things as, like, outside of absolute terms. Yeah. And understand that nothing is a failure until all the communists are dead. Yeah. And I think that every step along the way, every attempted autonomous zone and every protest that doesn't accomplish anything is part of the process of getting where we're trying to go. I try not to think over much about what is possible or what is sustainable or what is like necessarily even useful.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's far more generally useful to look at the material circumstances on the ground and imagine what could be done and how that can be instrumentalized to make things better.
I think that's a really good way to look at
it. Yeah, because I think everybody has a tendency to approach these things in these absolute terms of like, well, this is a waste of time, this is a waste of energy. And at a certain point in CHAZ, you had folks, you had like relatively prominent leftist organizations in Seattle, like publicly retracting their support of the place.
Right.
Which I kind of understand why, because, you know, the place was infiltrated straight to hell. And,
yeah.
You know, but I don't know. I still feel like at a certain point you've got to step back and see like you have to have your own principles, and if you're with a group that has its own principles and its own like lines you will not cross, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, I feel like no one should be moralizing about what is the right or the wrong thing to do, and nobody should be giving a shit about optics.
No.
I think what we should be doing as much as possible is supporting what's happening on the ground in every way we can, and not like hand wringing over, well, is this the right thing or is this going to accomplish anything? Like, if you don't, the instant you start thinking that anything isn't possible, you've already lost.
Yes.
And I really do feel like there is a sort of unhinged kind of psychosis that you need to be a truly effective communist, because you have to be willing to believe that actually, yes, the way that things are right now, we can fix that. We can make it better. You know, like, I have the audacity to believe that we can house all the houseless. Like, the houses are all right there, and you look at the law, and it's like, well, there's all these borders in the way, all these hurdles that we have to jump to get to a point where we can house all the houseless. But it's also like, you can also just fucking do it.
Yes.
Like we've already seen this in other places. Like in California, there have been, like, you know, occupations of houses where it's like, well, no, we're just gonna house people here, and that's just how we're doing it now.
Yeah.
I'm protecting them against the cops. My big thing right now is basically trying to get as many leftists in this fucking country to accept that they need to train with guns.
Yeah.
As possible. Like, that's where my head is at right now. It's like, leftists need to, at the very least, be comfortable using or being around firearms, and ideally ought to own a gun of some kind.
Yeah, people need to get past the sort of association with liberals, because a lot of people on the left come from liberalism, and that's fine. But it's amazing what kind of baggage can sort of stick around. Because a big one is gun policy. It's like,
oh yeah,
obviously, if you're a liberal and you think a few like slight tweaks and reforms are going to solve all our problems, why the fuck would you even want something like that? And also, if you don't have the strategic understanding of what fascism is and what fascists are gonna do,
right? Yeah.
Like I see why liberals have that position, but if you have moved beyond that, there's simply no justifying having it anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think, I come from that too, where, like, for the longest time I was vehemently anti-gun, and it's amazing how far I've, like, spun in the opposite direction from where I was even, like, a year or two ago.
Sure, yeah.
but yeah, there's so many. I think there's just a general sort of we need to be materialists about this attitude that I think that needs to be adopted.
Yeah.
For by a lot of folks, and the two most prescient things for me are number one, the gun culture in this country is such that like conservatives have a monopoly on guns. Regardless of how you feel about that, the fact is that, even though most of the time when they say, 30 to 50 Proud Boys are on their way, that's an empty threat.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that those people do exist.
Yeah.
And there will come a point when that threat will not be fake.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, do you want to be a peaceful protester at that moment in time? Do you want to? I don't know.
Vroom.
Yeah, I live right by a very active road, so there's a lot of that's sort of unavoidable. I apologize.
No, that's cool. It's cool.
But yeah, like that's one of the big things that folks need to come to terms with. Is like, it's not ideal, but the fact is, somebody with a gun is going to feel a lot less likely to. Like they're gonna a person with a gun feels a lot more powerful than they would without a gun. Yeah. But if they know that the crowd that they're walking into also has a lot of guns, they're going to feel a lot less powerful.
Yeah, that's why when both sides of a protest show up with guns, which happened recently, it's escaping me which city, but there was everyone was talking about it like the day before yesterday. There was a big thing where a right-wing militia and then some kind of left-wing militia showed up. And you know what? Nobody got nobody was shooting at each other because suddenly you're not in a position where you control who lives and dies. You're in a position where you need to fucking watch yourself or this could turn into a little fucking war. Like, yeah, it's a very different dynamic, and I know which one I would prefer if I'm gonna if the alternative is being on the side with no guns, like. And obviously, we don't endorse any sort of violence or crime. I'm just speaking about like basic self-defense and exercising your Second Amendment rights.
Of course, yeah.
That's what it's all about. We love rights here on the stream.
Yeah, we love rights. The other thing that we need to come into terms with. Is that the most dangerous weapon that every enemy of the protest movement has access to is cars.
Oh yeah, we've been seeing that fucking constantly.
Yeah, constantly, and the fact that folks haven't done more to deal with that is sort of kind of amazing to me. Because you'll see footage of or photos from China where folks have like plastered bricks onto the road and all sorts of formations to make it hard for cars to drive over there. Like there has to be more deployment of like I don't know. There's so much of protesting going on right now is very temporary. Feels very like we're walking through this space, but we don't want to leave a mark. And I feel like that has to change because it's consistently becoming a thing of like folks show up to a protest, cops will gas them in one direction, and then right wingers will drive a fucking minivan through them on the other side, and it's like. There's a lot of the left, at least in this region, needs several come to Jesus moments.
Oh yeah, most certainly. I feel like we might kind of be in the middle of one, but it's gonna depend to what degree people can learn their lessons.
Yeah. So June Circuit in the chat asked if there was said there wasn't a drive-by in CHAZ that got ended by armed guards, and the answer is yes. There were a couple of shootings that happened, but it's really hard to know exactly what happened because there was a drive-by, and the people who were driving that car were killed by folks on the border. But the folks who were doing that drive-by were like 14 and 15 years old.
Right.
And there are a lot of like open questions about that. But at the same time, it's like everybody is sort of moralizing like you killed minors. And, well, yeah, but they were shooting at people with guns. That is a thing that happened.
So there's been a lot of ambiguity about that. There's been a lot of and there's actually something I wanted to talk about. But I'll get to in a sec, because it seems like some people are saying, all right, some people like shot us or shot at us and then they got shot. And then some other people were saying that the two teenagers who got killed were different, or that it was a different vehicle, and something, like the mainstream media and journalists and stuff weren't really part of it. So we've just kind of got like hearsay from loads of different people, and it's not really clear what the fuck happened. Do you? Yeah,
I'm no clearer than you.
All right, I was gonna ask if you had any sort of info on that at all, because
no, I think this is actually one of the things that gives me a little bit of hope about the organization behind CHAZ a little bit, because there was, you did have the security team, right, that they were communicating with each other.
Okay.
And the fact that they never gave anybody up over that.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been like one person charged for that shooting. That at least tells me like, okay, they are not in the mood of like, turning people over to the cops, and they certainly judged that it was I don't know. It is one of those things like, yeah, fucking, it is. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
And I don't think a lot of people do. And I think we just kind of just have to be okay with that.
Yeah, this kind of ties into something I wanted to bring up, which is this was a personal kind of beef I had with CHAZ, not with you. That there wasn't really an effort to, I guess, make statements about anything at any point. Like, obviously, don't fucking give people up, but like so after those two kids got fucking shot in whatever circumstances, what I saw is that like there is an ecosystem of fascist quote journalists who just make shit up, and they ran with it, and the story got increasingly fucking ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
I just feel like it would have made a huge difference if there was anything put in place for CHAZ to like make statements when shit would happen, to be like, to clarify, to get, to find out from the people who were there, and not to say who it was, but just to be like, okay, this is what happened. Like, were those the same fucking people who were shooting into CHAZ? Was it an accident? Were those fucking like random people in a similar vehicle? Like, having no statement at all from CHAZ it feels like it's just setting the stage for people like fucking Andy Nago to just like decide what happened,
Yeah. I mean, there were attempts at, like, there was a Medium piece that was released that was like, the official demands of CHAZ. But yeah, generally speaking, there wasn't a propaganda arm. There wasn't the fact that there was no statements made from anybody. Yeah, like that was like a day or two before the end, basically.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think most of the people who were really doing the legwork there had kind of backed off.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I completely agree with you that like there needed to be some sort of central structure of like just making statements and clarifying things to the public, because fucking Andy No just lies.
Yeah,
runs with shit.
He was on it like the evening or I think it was the following morning when like the statement was released by like the cops that like the two people who'd been shot were minors. He was like immediately just like CHAZ is murdering kids, and then he just started adding him, and then like the people around him just started adding weird details, and like you started just seeing people spreading the most like totally ludicrous shit. So it's I don't know. I guess it's like how hard would it have been to have a few people run a fucking Twitter account or a Facebook page or something,
Yeah, the fact that didn't happen is insane. Can I ask for a bathroom break real quick?
Oh yeah, I was actually gonna suggest a break because I'm gonna grab a drink. Are you okay to stay for a bit longer, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, we are gonna have a brief intermission for a few minutes. Don't go anywhere, chat. We'll be right back.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm gonna put on some music or something for the intermission. Why not? Yeah, we're intermissioning now. Yeah, here we go. Do this. All right, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Hello, hello. I believe we are back.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. We've done it. We've bathroomed, we've beveraged. I've got me a cold one. That I assure you was cracked open with the boys. I wouldn't dream of doing it any other way.
Of course.
What were we saying before the intermission? Skittles is the boys. That's right.
I don't remember. I don't recall. I am.
CHAZ and social media. Oh right, yeah. I was complaining that they didn't have a fucking a propaganda arm. I love a good propaganda arm. You know, like it doesn't have to be a full wing, just an arm. I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah. Just enough to throw a punch. Whoops.
Just. Yeah, a metaphorical one, you know.
Yeah. Only metaphorical punches.
Yeah. Yeah, I was interested in hearing if you know a bit about what the community on Capitol Hill thought about CHAZ being there. Like, did you guys have the support of the locals, do you think?
I would say yes.
Ooh.
It's interesting because there were a number of people who are like like millionaire landlords that own property in the area who showed up and were very like, oh, with the businesses, but like the businesses loved it,
right?
Because this was right after, like, this was within a couple of days of the full like business closures due to COVID-19 had finally like passed. So now folks were allowed to actually open up their businesses. So this was the most, foot traffic that a lot of these places had seen since like February.
Right. Okay.
And so they were like super happy about it. And there was like an element of, I don't know. There was an element of like fear about property damage or whatever, but everybody had their windows boarded, and that made the place like just a spectacle of public art, which was really cool.
That is cool.
But like, the thing is, everybody who lived in the area for the 2 or 3 weeks before CHAZ started to exist, they were getting pissed off at the cops because they were drowning the streets in tear gas.
Yeah, and you've got to fucking live there, so.
Yeah, you got to live there, and I come from Oklahoma, where everybody has like central air and like never opens a window because it's always either at freezing or at boiling outside. But now that I've lived here for a bit, it's like, oh yeah, you just have your windows open all the fucking time, otherwise you would die.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like those folks were like pissed off at getting tear gas in their homes. And I mean, everybody was skeptical at first, but as time went on and it continued to be like a really cool place, it was like, I remember sitting out in Cal Anderson Field, and there was somebody who was like painting nails, like they had set up a station, and they were painting this little girl's nails, and she had like 2 siblings, I think, of around the same age. They were like, I don't know, 4 to 5 years old range. And their mom was with them, and the mom and the person doing the nails were chatting, and the mom was like, I haven't felt this. I think what she said was something along the lines of, one of my kids ran off in the other direction for a bit, and I didn't even worry about it because I knew they'd be safe, and they came back. I haven't felt this safe letting my kids come with me out here in a really long time. And it was like, I don't know, everybody it felt like it was really supportive. I mean, I witnessed firsthand on the very first day, the Seattle Department of Transportation was there to take a lot of the barricades back, and protesters negotiated with them. Mm-hmm. We're like, hey, can you not take all of them from us? Can we like keep some of these? And the SDOT folks were like, listen, we don't want to take anything that you don't want us to take.
Right.
And that started this sort of like collaborative relationship with Public Works. Where,
now that I fucking like to hear.
Exactly. That was one of the things of like in real time we were it wasn't just protesters versus everybody. Mm-hmm. The thing is you had there's one member of the city council, Kashama Sawant, who is like just absolutely incredible. She's a member of like a Trotskyist organization, political party here, and she's like she's been the most like radical voice in Seattle politics.
Do the Trots do entryism there too?
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about this shit. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
That's a good joke, I'm sure. I have to.
No, I'm dead serious. They do entryism here. It's a thing. Like,
yeah. Oh God.
God bless them. They try.
Yeah,
they try.
The thing is, yeah. God, I'm so tired. So yeah, like, but she's genuinely been like she's been on the ground a number of times and gotten like tear gassed with protesters.
Okay.
But there were a couple of times like she the night that the East Precinct was abandoned, she got up and spoke, and a couple of protesters were like mocking her and told her to fuck off, and like somebody got up on the stage and was like making fun of her accent. And so that was really frustrating, but I think it was it was a testament to Sawant's actual politics that that wasn't like her, she didn't give up on the movement as a result of that. Okay. Because she's not in it for herself.
But
like she's spearheaded chemical weapons bans and extending the eviction moratorium to 6 months after the end of the civil emergency.
Right.
Which is really fucking important.
Also, a wingless monkey. Entryism is a practice that some socialist groups will do, where it's kind of big with Trotskyists, where they will. Basically, it's like they'll join the Labor Party, or they'll run for positions in the Labor Party or the Democrats, or a party that they think they can sort of enter and move to the left. And
right.
I would describe my current position in regards to the Labor Party as exitism, which is getting people who have even somewhat socialist values and being like, hey, have you noticed that this party hates you? How about like doing anything else? How about putting your time, energy, and money into like more serious socialist organizing? So I don't really agree with some of the older Trotskyists who want to do entryism, but because they did entryism is why Jeremy Corbyn happened, because he's definitely a Trotskyist. Definitely. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, well, what's interesting about Kashama Sawant is that so far that's actually worked. Like the Seattle City Council has sided with her more often than with Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle.
Damn.
And the Kashama Sawant put forward, basically said like, I'm calling for. This was, a month ago. I'm calling for Jenny Durkin to resign, and if she doesn't resign, I'm going to introduce articles to have her evicted. and
king shit. What?
Yeah, and they're like Sawant has consistently been like, using chemical weapons on protesters is bad. We need to defund the police. Like every time there's been a demand, Kshama Sawant has been like the guy there to be like, hey, here's a policy proposal to actually make this happen.
That rules.
And like at some point, she has the keys to Seattle City Hall. She just unlocked the doors and let like hundreds of protesters into City Hall to protest one night. No, Kshama Sawant's a real one. Like
that's great. That rules. Like I will talk shit to some degree about entryism as a strategy, but it's never a bad thing to have people in positions like that who are sympathetic. That's always a benefit.
And this is also the important thing is that it would be very easy. Like Jenny Durkin and the head of the police department, whose name I can't remember, Best. I can't remember her first name. But they have been trying very, very hard to like destroy Kshama Sawant's reputation, and Jenny Durkin called on the Seattle City Council to investigate Sawant on like misconduct stuff or whatever, and the Seattle City Council released a statement like roundly refusing that call to action.
Oh, that fucking rocks.
Right. That's the thing, is like it would be very easy for them to turn around and sort of like I kind of half expected them to try to turn around and throw her out.
Yeah.
But it seems like she has actually pulled a lot of these people very far left.
That's huge.
It is incredible. This is why, like, for a long time with CHAZ, what I was saying is that like literally the only city organization that is against CHAZ is the police.
Yeah,
because it had the full support of the Seattle City Council and Parks and Rec and utilities and everything.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the question of like, is CHAZ a misnomer because it's not really an autonomous zone, like completely ignoring the fact that temporary autonomous zones have a long and storied history. The fact is that it's a vision of a place that is autonomous from the police state.
Yeah, and I will never call it CHOP. You can put a gun to my fucking head.
They tried really hard to push that, where they even like covered up a lot of like signage that originally said CHAZ.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, that creeped me out. It was like, I think that was the moment when I really realized this thing is infiltrated. Like,
the instant that like became more of a thing, it's like, okay, I see where the winds are going. Like, yeah, because that was the same day that the cops got let in. Like that was the same day that we were like pushing them back, and then that other person let them in. So yeah, the place was absolutely infiltrated, and that's like, that was really frustrating. Yeah. I wish I had spoken up more. There were a number of times where I was seething at like the boundaries of somebody speaking, and they're outside of the precinct talking about. I really wish I had I wanted to speak up, but I felt like it wasn't my place to speak up, and that's part of the problem, right? Is there is this sense of like, well, I'm a white person, what do I have to say? But I'm also a trans person. Here's a completely fucking separate thing.
Go off.
I've never seen more trans people out in the world than when I saw it at CHAZ, and that makes sense to me because Seattle is a big tech place. There's a lot of trans people in tech. Like it kind of there's a demographic crossover there. Despite this fact, I have never been so consistently misgendered in my life, and like I don't pass, right? Like I generally have more of like a butch look, and when I was going out I was wearing leather jacket, not a denim jacket, right? But I do have like two pins right above my heart that are like, one is the trans flag and the other is the lesbian flag, so it's like right, look, look down just right below my face. You can see there's a hint.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I haven't quite figured out how to talk about this, and also like how to understand it for myself, because I'm not sure how much of it is just there's so many intersecting elements with it. But the last time that I was there was the night that I stayed over. It was after the shooting, the first like actual shooting happened in CHAZ.
Right.
I went there and stayed the night. Helped chase off some dudes on motorcycles that tried to ride through the tent city. That was fun because they were like, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna ride through," and then they realized, "Oh wait, people are trying to stop us," and someone almost hit them with a baseball bat.
Yeah, that's what I like to fucking see.
Yeah, so they fucked off and they never showed back up.
Good.
But like, that night, I got really. I started to feel really defeated by the end of that night because I kept running into this situation of people treating me like I was an infiltrator,
right?
Which I understand in the sense, like, you know, this place is compromised and everybody's paranoid, and you know, even though I've been there a lot, I haven't really, like, you know, talked to a whole lot of people who are on the organized, like, as many people as I've talked to, I haven't talked to a ton. You know, there's always so many people doing the actual work, and
yeah,
the folks doing the actual work are the ones who don't want to talk,
right,
most of the time, because they don't want to be talking to a cop.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Like, it was like I'd been there for like 8 hours, and I kept getting this sort of assumption of like, oh, are you here to cause chaos? Are you a Proud Boy? Are you here to kill somebody?
Right.
And I you know, nobody ever asked me that or whatever. It was just sort of this air of like suspicion that was with me at all times. And I started getting really fucking frustrated because, like, I did in fact sign up on a sheet. Like, I talked to somebody who set up his table outside the precinct that was like on a walkie talking to somebody on the security team.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, we're setting up a group for, you know, just to have people here overnight, just so we know that we don't have like a boots on the ground shortage. And I signed up on this, and I was in a group chat, and everybody that I talked to had never heard of this group chat, didn't know anybody that I was talking about. And every time I tried to ask, like, hey, can I meet up with people on the group chat so that I like know who can fucking vouch for me and who I can vouch for?
Yeah.
There was there was no. I never met any of those people.
Right.
We never met up, and so I just kept being like, yeah, I don't. There's no without any fucking organizational anything. There's no sense that, like, you know, I've taken a shift here and I'm being treated like I'm garbage. I don't know. It got really dispiriting because it just kept happening.
Well, it's interesting to me that they were organized enough to make sure that there was like enough people there, and to arrange that, and to have some degree of communication with each other. But then outside of that group of people who are like, yeah, we're gonna do security, just nothing. Like, that seems like an enormous oversight, especially if you're meant to be like helping with security. Like, people need to fucking know who is doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that there were multiple security groups that had organized independently, and they were like communicating with each other, but they were very, you know, for good reason, they were skeptical, right, of letting people know any particular information. But there was also just the result of that is this sort of like air of I don't know, hostility that made it really, really tough.
I definitely don't like the idea of independent security factions who may not communicate or trust each other. That doesn't feel like a good recipe to me.
No, absolutely not. And so it was like that feeling of being treated like a threat and also consistently being misgendered.
Yeah.
Like all night. I had, and also this was right after somebody had been kidnapped from CHAZ, I believe.
Oh shit.
Now, yeah. So I don't know how this. I don't know any more information about this. Like as far as I know, but somebody got kidnapped, and when it happened, everybody was saying it was a trans woman.
Right.
Later on, the same people said, "Oh no, it wasn't a trans woman," but there was no more information about it. I don't know how they assumed it was a trans woman at first. I don't know how they decided it wasn't, and I don't know whether this person is okay,
right?
Which is terrifying. But like that fact was just sort of at the time I was under the assumption that a trans woman had been kidnapped, and I was just feeling very like defeated. And lately I've just been in this very sort of doomer mood about gender in general, and feeling like trans feminine people are sort of disposable to society in a very specific way. Right. And I had like a full I had a panic attack in CHAZ that night. Like as the sun was coming up, I had a panic attack in Cal Anderson Park where I kind of just laid down on the grass and cried for a while. The other thing that happened though is that I'd been waiting for the trains to start going so I could go home. Mm-hmm. And I went up okay, the trains are going now, I can go. And I went up to where the train station is, and there was a cop who was like outside the train entrance, like surveying things. And there were cops like at the borders of CHAZ. And one of them was one of the cops that we had pushed out.
Right.
And I just had this feeling of like this cop had been like recording faces, mm-hmm. and we already knew that the cops were like finding excuses to arrest people that they had quote unquote probable cause of. I saw that and I was immediately like, I just can't win. Like there's nowhere I can go, and so I had a panic attack and I called my friend to come get me.
Right.
And I actually haven't really been able to get back out since then. I've been forced to reckon with the fact that night actually really screwed with me in some really weird ways, and I don't know how much of it to ascribe to CHAZ or to any sort of like success or failure mm-hmm. On the ground, as much as it's just my own mental health and probably staying there longer than I should have. And it was a bad combination of things, but it definitely put me in a really compromised emotional state that I still haven't really recovered from.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, actual conditions there, certainly didn't help. Do you, I mean, I don't know if you've had enough distance from it to say, but do you think there are things organizationally that could have been done to sort of prevent people, or at least you, from feeling like that in the first place when you're in CHAZ? I mean,
well, I have no idea. I think okay. I think attempts were made.
Right.
It was one thing that's cool is that I like I said, I've never seen as many trans people out in the open as I did there, and I actually did encounter several who were fans of my work, which is really bizarre. Mm-hmm. But like,
that's not that bizarre. I mean,
I still think of myself as just some random asshole. I forget that I do have videos that are seen by tens of thousands of people. But
yeah, you're kind of a big deal.
I guess I don't know if I would say that. But anyway, like, you know, there is Riot Grill had set up, which is like it was a vegan sort of outdoor restaurant thing that they had set up in the shelter,
Yeah.
where they were constantly cooking food and giving it away for free. And they had a big sign out front that said "Do not gender the staff," and you know, sort of general instructions there for folks, like very simple instructions for folks who might not know what that means. So just like, you know, just say, you know, hello or whatever. You know, you don't need to do the sir, ma'am thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as like organizational, I mean, you know, a lot of it is just that, you know, it's a cultural problem of we have a very ingrained sense of gender roles and what a person of a certain gender looks like, and you know, it's, I don't know how much of like a I don't know if a van card party can fix that.
Well, I mean, obviously, obviously you can't, you know, organize away like the ideas of gender and stuff so easily. But like, I mean, do you think even something like if people were arranging transport for the people who were fucking like staying overnight so that they wouldn't have to say go to the train station where there's cops, you know, or like maybe that might have made some degree of difference, perhaps.
No, absolutely. Well, and I think it also just has to do with the fact that, again, because the only place to stay was in the tent city, you know, you didn't have as many people sort of staying all the time. Yeah. And a lot of people, so a lot of the folks who stayed in the tent city were either houseless folks, or they were folks who had enough money for, like, you know, camping gear.
Right.
And so it was sort of a weird mix, and a lot of folks were kind of justifiably afraid to stay there for a while. It kept getting bigger and bigger. It was very populous by the end.
Right.
But I think if there is, like, you know, again, like a hotel, a CHAZ hotel, where people stayed, where you actually got to know people, if there was a way to actually get to know people and work with them more consistently, without the same level of like suspicion and fear, that would certainly help. I don't know, like all of these things interlock, you know. As far as safety, like, yeah, I think I felt really safe there that night. It was like there was a point at which folks were setting up folks were setting off fireworks.
Right.
And it was bad. Like there was a point where folks were like setting off big fireworks right next to people, really close to the tent city. And it was a constant confusion as to who is doing that, and some said it was the family of the person who had been killed because they were at the site of where they died. And it's like, I don't know, that seems like a pretty dumb thing for a family to do. I don't think that's what that was.
Yeah, that sounds like bullshit. I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know. Besides that, though, like I felt safe in a general sense there after that sort of cleared up. It was just like, I don't know. At that point, it felt like the place was on its. It was sort of like treading water, and I think everybody sort of knew about it, and it was more folks were trying to mitigate damage as much as possible.
Right. It's disappointing to hear that I guess that there was that sort of to put it simply, it didn't sound like there was much of a communal situation here, I suppose. Like there was the lack of organization seems to have led to suspicion and people not knowing who's doing what, and it just seems like the one thing that should have been the strength of something like CHAZ is being able to form quite a sudden, tight-knit community and group of people. But it just seems like because of the refusal to organize and to make sure that people were communicating and being on the same page, it just sounds like that didn't really happen.
Yeah, and I think also it's difficult. Like, I want to remind everybody that I'm relating events from my very limited perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really try to be part of a lot of organizational stuff until a ways in, so I don't actually know that this stuff wasn't happening.
Okay.
And the thing is that there were people who were there when on the very first day, the day after the precinct was abandoned, and it was just a sort of dream. A group of like 20 people had a little, round table outside talking about what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those people I saw stay there throughout. Like, I kept running into them throughout the time that I was there. So there is a core group of people who were consistently part of CHAZ.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much they communicated with each other, but I think this is the thing, is that I imagine that there is a sense of like, okay, we have our affinity groups that we've made here, that we're doing this thing or that thing. We don't necessarily need anybody to come in to this particular affinity group because we've got it covered.
Yeah.
And we don't want cops to infiltrate and undermine what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that there was a lot of that, but I think where this lands is where a lot of my feelings about CHAZ have to land eventually, which is that everything I thought I knew about the place was wrong because it was all orchestrated by liberal infiltrators.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately what really was probably the problem is that folks were trying to create these sort of groups, and like we're trying to create like a sort of internal sense of leadership, but they couldn't do so fast enough to sort of disarm the liberal wing of things. Well, so part of it is like, it doesn't fucking matter what the public thinks, right? It doesn't matter what the mainstream media thinks, because they're going to come up with their lies anyway. They have their own class interest for the narrative they want to tell about what CHAZ is.
Yeah.
And to the same extent, it's like, you don't need everybody in your party. You don't need everybody in the like CHAZ organizational roundtable.
No. A lot of people aren't going to want to be in it as well.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think what happened is
you can say it. It was the gamers.
It was the gamers. I don't know. It's just like it's really complicated. It's a complicated interlocutive thing. I don't want to give the impression that there was absolutely nothing. That like it was this sort of irreconcilable, like there's we didn't work on organizing forward facing, so it was this sort of air of distrust and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of folks I don't know. I think it comes down to the fact that like the core group didn't have their own sort of pre-existing relationships with each other,
right?
Beforehand, because like the no cop co-op that was started pretty soon after CHAZ started.
Mm-hmm.
That's like just like one block off from the precinct, and the place where everybody took pictures of it. It was in the central location. Lots of free stuff there. the person who is running the no cop co-op from day one is one of the people who has since shown pictures of herself with cops.
Jesus.
Yeah. And like she did, like I had some fucking encounters with her. Oh my God. Like this person was unhinged. Like she had been awake for many days at this point, but like there was a point at which, you know, she like completely dismantled the no cop co-op and moved it basically right to the border, and just had all this pile of stuff.
Right.
And me and my friends showed up, and like we got together with a couple of other folks and just started organizing it, because otherwise it was just going to get looted and or like seized by the cops at the border.
Yeah.
So but she kept being like, you guys are trying to loot this, you're trying to steal all of this stuff. And it's like, what do you mean steal? This is stuff you're giving away to the community. We're trying to help that.
Yeah.
And so we organized a bunch of stuff. Like it was a nightmare. It was, you know, weeks of donations that had just been stockpiled haphazardly without any sort of organizational system.
Right.
And so you have all sorts of things that have expired, and all kinds of resources that people have been asking for and couldn't find. And so what we tried to do is like we got in contact with all of the medical tents and all of the different food tents and different places, and like said, hey, if you need stuff, we're going to redistribute it.
Yeah.
And then the co-op relocated to the garage of the precinct, which was like a really baller move in my mind, because that's like, now we're actually impinging on their territory.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the entrances that they liked to use. Mm-hmm. And you know, the person who was running the co-op was like pissed off and said, oh, people are trying to loot this. She showed up in her own like rented van and grabbed a bunch of stuff and like drove off and stuck it in a storage facility somewhere. So like she literally stole from, she became the looter she was so afraid of. And like everybody was like, no, we gotta, like, you've got these donations that you've been getting because you're like in the central location. You've been taking donations from everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, redistribute them to the place where they can go. Like so that to me felt like a moment when, okay, we're trying to excise this liberal element and we're trying to make this place work better.
Yeah. And
communicate more. Mm-hmm. And that felt like a really big victory to me. Because we had gone there, because this was also after they had, you know, quote unquote organizers had agreed to move some of the barricades and like replace them with other things. And that was something that just sort of happened, that nobody, like, who agreed to this? I didn't agree to this.
Right.
So you basically had like a handful of liberals basically like show up at exactly the right time. It's very clear that they had organized this with like city help, because they knew exactly when the fewest people would be in CHAZ. So they basically had people show up at the border with like a map of CHAZ and said, here's where the barricades are now, and here's our plan for ones that we want to put in. And they're basically, you know, trying to let traffic through and all of this stuff. And it was like, you know, showing these plans to like random people on the border, and then being like, all right, we got approval, let's do it. And then they had, you know, SDOT folks show up and move things. And it was like, because there weren't enough people there to, you know, make a fuss, they were able to just do it by the time everybody realized that what was happening.
Right.
You know, it was too late. And it was, again, one of those situations where, hey, if we had sort of like a vanguard party, or if we had some sort of occupation that lived there that could then be called upon to like rush out, you weren't coming from, you know, 6 miles away. Yeah. You know, so
this is a good example of that sort of central contradiction we talked about before, right? Of kind of having that organic and self-directed force that allowed this thing to exist in the first place, while having like that organizational security. Because if you don't have a base of people who you can at least be pretty sure aren't cops, like, you're gonna have these sorts of problems. And it does sound like distrust between different groups and stuff hindered things a lot, because there was no organizational capacity for these different groups to like get together and communicate and be clear on like who is who and who's like an established person and who's some fucking freak who kind of looks like a cop who we just like found yesterday. Like, because the thing about undercover cops, or so I'm told, is that you know, a lot of them aren't. They can, if you're looking out for them, they can be kind of obvious. Like,
yeah,
you're probably not going to be an undercover cop if someone's keeping an eye out for one. You know, there's a sort of person who is typically a cop.
Yes, absolutely.
And I just feel like it shouldn't have been with a bit of structure. I feel like it maybe some of these problems of constant fucking McCarthyite paranoia, but in reverse, could have been avoided.
Yeah, I think that would have helped. There's so many like organizational things that would have helped. I don't know. I really feel like there is a lot of I wish I had talked to more people, honestly. I wish I had try, but again, everybody was like everybody that was, you know, doing things was wary of talking to people for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and that's another problem, because I think as anyone who's been involved in any kind of organizing will have learned, and as I'm sure you're well aware, liberals have no fucking problem getting up there and taking the mic.
Yeah, exactly.
They will do it. They will absolutely do it. So if and that's the thing. If there's 50% of the crowd are fucking communists who see what the liberal is doing, but no one feels that they can speak up, then like that's a fucking problem, because the liberals gonna keep talking.
Yeah, no, there were a couple of times where like I said before, I was hearing somebody speak and I was just absolutely livid, and I kept looking around, like hoping that somebody else would share my emotion, and everybody was just sort of like, you know, nodding along or whatever, and it was this sort of thing of, you know, without a central organizing philosophy or organization, you know, if somebody takes the mic and it's like, here's why the cops getting territory back is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, okay, I guess if you say so. And it's again, like, because so much of it was organized on race principles rather than class, that certain voices were elevated based on what the person looked like rather than their actual like political leanings, which like I don't want to sound like a reactionary type person and saying like identity politics is this huge problem for this type of thing, because that's not what I mean. Like, through a Marxist lens, you have or through a materialist lens, you have a better tool set for understanding systemic racism than you do if you're just looking at things in terms of, you are black, therefore you need to your voice needs elevated. And it's the thing of like, because it's not that it's a problem that, you know, certain people were allowed to speak. It's just that, you know, it doesn't matter whether this person is black if they're a liberal. It's like, you gotta, sorry, that shouldn't be welcome.
Yeah, it's going to be really easy for liberals to exploit that too. If your only policy is like, we just need to get black people on the mic, then it's like, okay. So keeping in mind that the state wants you gone, the state has nearly limitless resources, and they have a history of doing far, far worse for infiltration, they're going to go find some black people to come in and assert themselves at the forefront. Like, it's so reductionist. Sorry, it's so reductionist to just be like, oh yeah, just like anyone who's part of this group that is like, I don't know what percentage of the entire country, automatically is like almost like de facto leadership. Like, no, the fucking people who are part of this community and are working on this are de facto leadership.
Right. And I think it also shouldn't go unstated that Seattle, again, is an extremely gentrified area. Mm-hmm. It is an extremely rich area. It is a majority white place. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the people who can afford to live there are going to be like, you know, on skewing further to the right, even if they count themselves as leftists. Like, it's just sort of like a demographic consequence of the area. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody was very reasonably of this. Like, we need to elevate. We need to elevate specific voices. We need to make sure that people who are not used to being heard get heard. And I think that was an admirable thing to do. And generally speaking, a lot of times when I saw it, it was like, it was good. That was well done. Like, there were a lot of times when white people would be, you know, speaking up way too much, and folks would be like, "Hey, you need to give the mic to somebody else."
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, there was a lot of that, which was good. And it just like there didn't seem to be any sort of ideological policing, and that, you know, we keep circling back around to this. Just like, you know, when the liberals, when there is no more room in hell, the liberals shall co-opt the movement.
We keep circling back around to it because I feel like it is the central kind of lesson from all of this. Like, wow, only 16%, lower end 13%. I'm really surprised. I mean, I'm not American. I don't fucking know. I thought it'd be more, but
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, and again, this is another situation where you've got a contradiction. You can't just let anyone fucking come in and be like, we should be buddies with the cops because they're black, but likewise, you can't just have fucking white people dictating this fucking anti-racism thing. That would be, exactly. You know, again, you've gotta, you have to...
Well, okay, so the anti-racism thing, this actually gets to another one of the problems that the sort of protest movement all over. I don't know if I would call it a problem, actually, but it is sort of like one of these weird sort of contradictions.
Yeah.
Where the protest movement, it happened in reaction to, police violence.
Sure.
But in a lot of places, you'll have folks showing up asking the question of like, well, what are you guys actually protesting? Like, I went to a protest in Oklahoma, and it was the same thing. Of like, you know, there were like 500 people there. And there were a number of folks like, well, what are you guys actually protesting, though? And the thing is, there is this sort of like narrow-mindedness of, okay, so this is happening in reaction to, this is a solidarity protest for the George Floyd protests happening in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. Therefore, that is what it is about. And everything else, we have to stay in our lane. And we don't want it to co-op. But it very quickly becomes a thing of like, well, if your actual goal is to eradicate police violence, what you're actually talking about is a complete restructuring of how society works. And part and parcel of this is like, you know, police in America exist to defend capital. They exist to defend property. Yeah. So it immediately becomes a thing of, if you are blocking traffic, the cops show up because that's an interruption of revenue. If you are breaking windows at an Amazon facility, the cops show up because the same sort of thing. The cops are capitalist private security forces.
Mm-hmm. It was wrong of me to describe it just as an anti-racist thing. Like, that's certainly a central aspect of it. But yeah, it's undeniable that the way that racism in the U.S. intertwines with class society is, I think that's been a big fucking part of these protests in a way that, in a way that I think maybe wasn't quite to the same degree with previous things like Ferguson. I don't know, this feels more class conscious to me. I don't know if I'm imagining it.
I absolutely agree with you. Because, I mean, we can't ignore the fact that, you know, pandemic is going on. We just had Bernie get completely rat fucked out of the nomination and then bend over backwards to support Biden.
Yeah, he was posting cringe.
Yeah. It's been a really disappointing time for a lot of folks who've been like more and more radicalized leftwards.
Yeah.
And so I think at this point it is like, folks are reacting to this moment of like, well, what else is there? It doesn't feel like it's a solidarity thing as much as it feels like everybody is pissed off and sick of it and needs to like show up.
Yeah.
It is absolutely way more class conscious. And what's interesting is, so, in Seattle, a lot of the protests, there was like, oh, we don't want to do the thing of like, we're doing property damage. We're not like those protesters. And that was always very frustrating to me for reasons I've said.
Mm-hmm.
So the protests have been kicking back off because, it's been a war in Portland. And, the government is deploying feds in major cities, including Seattle. So protests happened yesterday. I think they're happening again today. Well, they're probably just going to keep happening for a while.
Yeah.
But thousands of people were back at the site of CHAZ last night.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like marching all over the place. They burned down the construction site of a juvenile detention center.
Yes, they fucking did.
And they like busted the windows at a Whole Foods and at like an Amazon Go store, which that Amazon store has been like attacked so many times. and it's so funny because every time you'll see somebody like, well, but they're attacking small local businesses. You can't do that. It's like every single time you actually look into which businesses are being attacked, it's like literally all of like the cops own businesses in and around CHAZ. One of the cops that killed an unarmed black woman here in Seattle, like owns like a nail salon near CHAZ, and that got brutalized. And folks were like some folks were like, oh, but what did this nail salon ever do to you? Like, well, fucking investigate who owns the place.
Yeah.
And so I think the failure of CHAZ, well, again, I wouldn't even call it a failure. I think the death of CHAZ.
Yeah, we're being hard on it because we're trying to criticize it and unpack what went wrong. But CHAZ was still ultimately a very good thing. I think
Oh yeah, and I think like I never had any illusions that this would be a permanent thing. It kept feeling like it was a possibility as time went on.
Yeah.
Especially with the gardens, and you had licensed psychologists actually giving therapy for people who were dealing with PTSD from fucking flashbangs and clouds of gas.
Yeah.
And you had people doing free COVID-19 testing, and people like showing up like they couldn't afford to go to a hospital to get a checkup. They would go to CHAZ.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. That's fucking amazing. Yeah. Like that is genuinely incredible. Like there is a lot to be proud of for sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like they had like tons of water bottles to give away. There was always all kinds of food, and it wasn't just granola bars and stuff. Like folks were cooking. Mm-hmm. And folks were donating all sorts of produce, and you could go there and get, like a bunch of onions and garlic and pasta, and like tomatoes and stuff, mm-hmm. and you could conceivably get all of the groceries that you would need for like a pretty robust family meal, like for free there, and still leave plenty for other people. Like it was not like a they were not hurting for these resources.
Yeah.
And I think for the folks there, it was less of a we need to make this a permanent thing than it is this is a moment for this is an opportunity for education. So you had people giving out leftist and anarchist literature all over the place. you had like there was an actual conversation cafe.
Oh, cool.
where folks had like set up a bunch of couches, and it was like designated to like, and there were a number of tents and things that were set up as like either as like decompression zones, or you come here and you just get to sit around and like there's no. It's the rule that like no political conversations. We just sort of hang out. It's just mutual support here.
Sure.
And then there's tents for like if you're basically like if you're a white person who's never thought about racism and you have some questions, like you can go there and ask some questions.
That's awesome. Like that's the sort of shit that should have been there. That's really good.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that, and everybody. The entire time, everywhere you walk, there was always people having like really, really serious political conversations, and like people were taught like just countless conversations about Marxism in public.
We love to see it.
Yeah, and so like regardless of whether the project itself, sort of met an untimely end. The fact is that a whole lot of people were radicalized and like saw that it was possible, saw that you can take a public park and turn it into gardens without a whole lot of work. Like it only took a couple of days, and they did it in a sustainable way. Like these were experienced gardeners. And the thing is, like the stuff that they were making, like a lot of it was flowers, some of it was produce. But it was not the intention was never for it to be like this is a garden that is going to feed the people forever.
Yeah.
It was more like here is agriculture that is something that has been divorced from feeling like a thing that normal people can do by by the way that we have corporatized agriculture in this country and all over the world, and now you can see how this like changes your relationship to the space, where instead of it being this sort of like grass that you're walking around on that is like a neutral area that's taken care of by the state, now it's like this is a place where living things are tended to and cultivated. And it immediately changes how you appreciate the space. And there were specific gardens that were like, this is a garden for indigenous people only.
Right.
And they had all sorts of signs around that were like educating people. There was a big focus on indigenous representation there and like indigenous voices there, which was very good.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. Regardless of like how the place wound up going, like I think now what we're seeing is that a lot of people saw how the place ended and are very over the sort of like liberal, like they've seen that the liberal line of respectability and we got to make sure we control the narrative and everything has to be good optics and stuff. They've seen exactly what that gets you, which is jack shit.
Yeah. No, this has
so
definitely been a huge learning experience for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a anybody who says that like this means X or Y thing finally. It's like no, this is that we're just getting started.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're speed running the revolution out here.
One good thing that comes of protests in general, but certainly of something with more longevity like this, is I can't think of a better, less like corporate-y word than networking, but it's networking. But like for socialism, like people will have met loads of great people through things like this.
I have.
Yeah, there you go.
A couple of people that I talked to now and like, yeah, I mean. There is definitely a lot of this like communication. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
No, it's great. And I think it is energizing even when things fuck up for people when this kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know, defeats, insofar as you can call it a defeat, can be demoralizing, but there's simply nothing more demoralizing than like probably mid 90s until mid 2010s when just like nothing fucking happened ever.
Yeah.
And there were these big protests, but they stayed mostly peaceful and respectable and nothing came of it. And it just didn't matter. This is a million times better than that, even though it had problems. Like, I'm very optimistic about where things are going right now.
Yeah, and things are going to continue to progress. And yeah, I think we're at a moment where, you know, there's no chance of this slowing down anytime soon. And I genuinely wonder, like, I have a hard time imagining what the future looks like right now, because, you know, we've got November coming up, and how the election goes is going to be this big thing.
Yeah.
But it is like, you know, now the feds are in the streets, and there's just some straight up Gestapo type shit going on.
Yeah, it's really fucking bad.
Further radicalizing folks.
Yeah, they're I think it can be easy to forget, especially if you've been like if you've been a socialist for quite a long time. It can be easy to forget how many people don't really believe that like the state would genuinely turn on them if they got too uppity.
Yeah.
And so things like this are always good for showing, like, no, they'll start fucking they will start fucking black vanning you real quick if you become like even a bit of an inconvenience to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's important to remember that people do need those reminders, and the state will eagerly give them those reminders, fortunately for us. In a big picture way, but unfortunately, obviously, in an immediate way.
That's what's always been so interesting to me about this moment, that, like, you know, you have all of these protests erupting all over the country in solidarity with the George Floyd protests.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, folks protesting in just like small towns and just random places, and 201, the cops show up with tear gas and rubber bullets. Yeah, and it keeps being this thing of like, just let them do it. Like, they'll peter out. Like, there's not going to be this like on the ground energy in a small town that's going to last for like a full week. But as soon as you start tear gassing protesters, you know, folks are like, wait a minute, no, fuck that. That's not good. And then, you know, more people show up.
Yeah,
and it's like, the question that everybody has to ask themselves is like, why? Why do the cops show up every single time? They would only do this if they genuinely believed that something was at threat. And then you have to immediately ask yourself then, like, so what is that threat? And what power do we actually have?
Yeah.
And if they're really that afraid, clearly we must be capable of doing something that threatens them.
Yeah, precisely. And in a lot of ways, it's fortunate that they seem so ill-equipped at diffusing that, because like the British police are quite good at it, and like there were protests and stuff here, but the British police were fucking hands off. Like I went to one thing, and there was literally there was a pretty fucking big crowd, but there was one van with a couple cops in it, and they just circled the block. They didn't even get out of the fucking car. That was it. I'm sure there were more police nearby in case, but they weren't like making their presence known or trying to intimidate or fight people. Literally just one van driving around the fucking block. And you know what? Nothing came of that protest. Nothing spicy happened. I think there's been a couple other ones, but they've all been really liberal. We're going to come and chant for an hour and go home sorts of affairs. And you know what? If those police had come and beat the shit out of people, there's a very real chance that things would have become more than that.
Yes.
And in a way, it's almost fortunate that the US cops can't fucking figure that out, because all they can react to things with is these huge demonstrations of the fact that the protesters are right, basically.
Yeah, well, and it really is an expression of the sort of hyper late capitalist society that we're in, where the cops are this, um, basically fascist military arm of the oligarchy
Yeah.
that control everything. And so the fact that they have no choice but to react to this way, because American culture is just like the property is above everything.
Yeah,
And
that has to be reified by the police at all times.
yeah,
Yeah.
because the instant you give up a second, like just a little bit of ground, because everything has to be hyper literal here. The instant you give up any ground, it's just like, oh no, now there is no law.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the one thing that I wanted to say about as far as like what's sad about the end of CHAZ, besides the biggest thing for me was the houseless people who had found shelter there and were safe there for the first time in a really long time. SPD had actually been undergoing like historic sweeps of houseless encampments
Right.
during the pandemic,
Of course, yeah.
and so displacing countless people
Yeah.
At a time when they're already so much more under threat. And so here at CHAZ, there was hand sanitizer everywhere. There were open bathrooms and tons of stalls and things. There's food. There were clothes banks. You could just get clothes. And there was healthcare, and there was COVID-19 testing. Like their needs were provided for. And when there were a handful of times when like folks would get testy, and there were times when people would be like really loud and angry, and rather than the cops showing up and at best beating up and arresting them, and at worst killing them, you had folks like go in and talk to them and de-escalate.
Yeah, like
and a
fucking
lot of those
people.
yeah, like people. And a lot of those houseless folks then became like helping out at CHAZ more. Like they then became parts of the community.
Yeah.
Because they were treated like human beings. And so to me it was that's the big loss, is like the safe residence for houseless people was taken away, and I haven't seen much in the way of like an attempt to replicate that or relocate them anywhere, and I find that, I don't know, deeply frustrating. I don't know.
I think it is worth saying though that people remember shit. That's the thing that I've always said, it cuts through any media narrative. It cuts through all the fucking bullshit punditry in the comments online. People remember the shit you go out and do. And if those, crazy socialists or whatever who fucking did CHAZ, if they were out here fucking like feeding people, they were out here materially helping people, people will remember that probably for the rest of their lives. Like people don't just forget shit like that when it happens in the real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I think again, like we have to look at everything in terms of how it adds up in the long term. And in the long term, we're clearly seeing more people radicalized and more people brought on in favor of this stuff. Like nobody likes the cops.
No.
And nobody is happy that folks are getting tear gassed and things. Like there's a number of folks, who think like, well, what do you expect? And conservatives who are like, well, that's what you get. But I think generally speaking, folks in Seattle are not, I don't know, I don't want to essentialize too much, but it feels like there's a lot more support for this kind of thing here I don't know. Seattle, like the Pacific Northwest in general, is just in this really interesting. We've been edging up on the cool zone a lot lately.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're in there, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And exciting to be a part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I just have one more question, and then we'll call it a night. But before that, I've got to quickly run to the bathroom. I'll just be like a minute.
Okay.
And while I'm gone, if anyone in chat has any questions or anything that they wanted to go over quickly, then Sarah, do you have time to?
Yeah.
Perhaps? Yeah? Okay, cool. I'll just be a moment.
Okay. What's up, chat? How you doing? How y'all feeling? Doing okay? Having a good morning, evening, whenever it is for you? It is 1:30 p.m. for me. So I have nothing but time. After this, I'm going to be editing a video. I'm feeling okay, Autumn Artist. I'm feeling all right. Cars drive by. My sleep schedule has been real bad, and I've been like tired. But like this is actually, I've woken up now for like the last like 4 or 5 days. I had to set like 6 alarms last night to make sure I woke up in time for this. But which is good because I need to stop sleeping in so late. I'm glad you liked it, Blastoise. I'm going to be doing a video about CHAZ eventually, where I'm gonna write a long form essay about it, and then I'm gonna do a video. Just gonna be like I'm talking about it constantly. But excuse me. But this is it's good to like do this sort of thing, like talking about it because I don't know, it helps clarify some things.
And I'm back.
Yeah. Oh my God. Apparently last night at the protests in the area formerly known as CHAZ, somebody threw an explosives device at the precinct.
Oh my.
Now, I have not seen. Let me find this because I had it open. I can't see. It was a Seattle PD. They had That's the interior. Hold on, there we go.
Oh, we got like pictures of the damage?
Yeah.
Let me have a little look.
Yeah.
Pop that in the stream chat if you can, so that the
people yeah. So we've got. Oh, that's the wrong. Didn't mean to do that. Delete that link. Whatever. Let's see. Actually, get this link. But yeah, it's a picture of.
Oh shit.
What's up?
I was trying to delete the first link you sent.
Yeah. Whatever. Nobody click that link. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's a picture of the outside. Somebody threw like some kind of explosive device. Now, I want to say like all that I've read about it is the Seattle PD line. Earlier today, at least one person breached the fence line at the East Precinct. Moments later, a device exploded, leaving an approximately 8-inch hole in the side of the precinct. This is one of several dangerous incidents that led the SPD declare today's incident a riot. because I only know this Seattle PD's line on this, I just don't know.
Right.
It does look like it was an explosion. It does look like it was something that happened from the outside. So who knows? I don't know the specifics, but there was some that it is a thing that happened, and so it is like, yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
But yeah. The protests have been.
Yeah, it's a weird explosion that it just left like a single large hole.
Yeah, that's why I'm very skeptical of what this is.
Yeah.
But also like, I don't know. They were gonna find an excuse to declare it a riot anyway.
Well, sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It definitely feels like things are going to continue to pop off here, and I'm sure they will do so also today as time goes on.
Yeah.
So what was the question you were going to ask?
Oh yeah, if no one has anything pressing in chat, my big thing. My theory is a cop shot a gas grenade through a plywood wall. You might be right about that guy. It looks about the size of one. I don't know. Cops always have the shittiest like lies when they try to make something up too. Like,
well, yeah, because the stakes have always been so low for them, where they can just kind of say whatever.
Yeah, they don't have to get clever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question, and like it's fine, I'm not expecting you to have like the answer, but just sort of your thoughts on this. What should communists and anarchists and all that, what should we be doing today in terms of our organizing, so that if tomorrow something like a CHAZ were to come about, we might actually be prepared to go in there and be of some use in terms of pulling things together into something maybe a little more coherent than what CHAZ ended up being.
Yeah.
Like where do you think, what sorts of things should we focus on, you know?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. Again, it's I'm a firm believer in the sort of diversity of tactics line.
Yeah.
I think everybody should be treating their friend group as its own sort of like independent action committee, where you as a person with a handful of friends, you're capable of doing all sorts of things. What those things could be is sort of, up to your imagination. I think an important thing to remember as these protests are happening is that it may seem like there is an infinity number of cops, but there are only so many. And the fact is, when there are 500 cops in downtown Seattle, guarding the precinct, they're not out doing other things. And so that's a moment when other sort of actions can happen, where you can take advantage of a moment to accomplish other goals. So when it comes to like things like ICE detention centers and prisons, I don't know. There's a lot of open questions about like, we got to do. We have a big incarcerated population problem in this country, and that's something that absolutely has to be dealt with as leftists if we want to make any kind of success. I know this is way off the beaten path of what you were asking.
No, it's good. It's good.
But like, generally speaking, the reason why I went there first is that when you see yourself not as an individual in need of a group, but as a person who is already part of several groups, you then start to understand political movements as these like chain link fences almost of just these different groups sort of like being pulled in different directions. And one thing that I did and that a lot of my friends did after after the like late March, when things really started to get kicking off, we started making lists in our heads of the people that, like, I can't take care of everybody, right? I can't do anything for the world, but I can choose, 3 or 4 people in my life who I was like, no matter what, I'm going to do everything I can to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's not a ton that I can do to help with, COVID-19 relief or whatever, but I can make sure that if my friend needs money, I can make sure that they have money, or I can give them attention, or, just talk to them, or that sort of thing. And then from that, there's like basic things of learning to cook bigger meals so that you can feed more people. And generally, like, seeing where the action spots are in your community, because there's always shit like this already happening. One of the reasons why this movement has spread the way that it has is that every city has its cases of unjust police violence. And so even if you have no history of protest, and even if you don't know where to start, there's a history that exists in your area which will facilitate some kind of movement somewhere. And so I think, in a general sense, the goal should be for folks to treat themselves and their friends like they're already in this mutually supportive world, so that when the time comes to show support, you're not like on your last legs on the way out there.
Yeah, that's a really fucking big piece of advice right there.
Because this is a thing that I'm sure everybody is dealing with right now, and that we've been dealing with for months now, is that everybody is burnt the fuck out.
Yeah.
Basically, all of my friends right now are just barely functioning, and it's painful to see, and it's hard to know what to do. And it's tough, because I'm there too. Some days I'm better off than others. That, like, I don't know, everybody's just in a really bad place right now. And so we have to be able to support each other so that we can have the space to recover when we need it. And that's easier said than done for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think, like, I know we have this whole thing about self-care. It's not a matter of self-care. It's a matter of like genuine, like, recovery. Like, I don't treat it as like, it's when you're taking a break and, like, disconnecting and recharging, you're not like eating a bar of chocolate. It's not a nice little treat for you.
Yeah.
It is a necessary part of maintaining stability, because nobody can be on board 100% of the time.
Yeah, there's something I'll often tell people, is that your first port of call, if you want to engage in serious revolutionary politics, your first port of call is making sure that you are sorted out. Because how many revolutions have been led by homeless people? Fucking none, because they're trying to survive. They, like,
exactly.
If you're fucking starving and freezing and your needs aren't met, you simply aren't going to go out there and like do the sorts of work that needs to be done. So first port of call is making sure that you're fucking looked after, because otherwise you're robbing the world of a capable, functioning person's contributions to fucking whatever project it may be.
Yeah, and to that end, like, regardless of whether there is a CHAZ in your area, there's almost assuredly some sort of group, like some kind of community kitchen or group that's providing aid to the houseless. You can still like go. You can find them and volunteer for them. And I think one of the big lessons of like, I've been watching a lot of Black Panther documentaries lately.
Fuck yeah.
And one of the things is like, that everybody's got a copy of the Little Red Book, and there's all sorts of proselytizing, political proselytizing, and it's like, we have this sort of thing in America of like, oh, that's rude or whatever, but I think if you're helping people with food, like somebody's starving and you give them some food, or help them get some food, like you can use that as an opportunity, like to spread radical ideas in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of a food program, and if somebody asks you why you're doing it, you fucking tell them. Like,
exactly.
Absolutely. Like, no, let it be known that the people out here fucking making sure people are fed are the fucking communists, It's not anyone else.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely important. And I think there's a myth of like the apolitical movement or whatever, and that absolutely needs to be dispelled.
Yeah, that's horseshit. Fuck that.
Yeah, but like I think generally everybody needs to be aware of their own sort of like living network of people, and when it comes to if a CHAZ sort of emerges in your area, the best thing you can do is show up there ready to enforce some sort of like communist agenda, I guess, like regardless of whatever organizational structure emerges, it should be everybody's goal to be like, all right, if a liberal starts talking, we stop them, and be ready to like defend yourself in that situation.
Everything won't be communist by default. You've got to fight for it because other people who are very much your enemies will be there fighting. Yeah.
And when I say defend yourself, I mean specifically like if you go up and say, hey, get off the mic or whatever, and folks start like booing you, and then it becomes a thing of like having to defend yourself like rhetorically. It's like, no, you have to understand this is what you're saying leads to. Yeah. This is where it goes. And if you still get like booed out of the crowd or whatever, that is what that is. But I don't know. It's really just a matter of like, you've got to be willing to make people uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of, I think, like phone anxiety about revolution, where it's like we don't want to. Nobody wants to like inconvenience anybody, or we don't want to piss anybody off.
And like it's some kind of dinner party.
Yeah, it's like, but you gotta though. You do gotta do that though. Is the thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, you have to do a lot more than that. So yeah, people gotta. I don't know. I've found millennials are really fucking polite, and I think a lot of it is down to like anxiety.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there's, with a lot of people my age, there's a lot of this genuine feeling of not wanting to like bother people. It's like, no, you fucking bother them. You go bother the fuck out of them right now. Because otherwise the liberals are gonna do it.
Yeah. No, I mean that's what I like anybody. I'm having to deal with that, and I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
One thing is like looking in your area to see. I'm not a huge fan of electoralism, and I don't think representative politics is necessarily the thing that's going to save us.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a situation, if there's a Kashama Sawant in your area who is doing the work to actually like support things, then you can find ways to support them. Like there's nothing wrong with supporting electoral campaigns or supporting politicians when it suits your needs.
Yeah.
And I think also there should generally be an attempt to ban evictions and ban late fees and things everywhere. And there was a big activist push here in Seattle to make that a thing.
Oh yeah, if there's a tenants union where you live, any of you, fucking join it, because they're going to be at the forefront of a lot of those fights, and also not a lot of liberals in tenants unions. They tend to be quite radical, I've found.
Yeah. So there's always these things that you can find that are constantly looking for support of some sort, and you might run into the situation of, we're a little bit worried about letting random people in because cops or whatever. But, unlike CHAZ, they will have a sort of like onboarding path where you can get involved without the suspicion of trying to be a Trojan horse or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like tenant unions and local food programs, like anything that immediately helps communities, like you said, folks will remember that, will remember when you tried to help them.
Yeah,
that's the sort of thing that you should be doing. Is we're not at the moment, I don't think, where the revolutionary circumstance is going to hit tomorrow and we're going to have the revolution and now communism is on the horizon. I think we're still some years out from that because we have a lot more like consciousness raising to do. And we're in the process of dispelling the liberal element, but there's still a lot of work yet to be done. And so I think rather than looking at things in totalizing terms and looking at things on the national level, you need to be taking a step back and seeing like little things that may seem completely like a waste of time, but that folks might remember, that like one or two people might remember, like, oh, that communist was picking up trash.
Yeah.
Those things add up over time.
Yeah, it's important to understand that the revolution is not a singular event, but an ongoing historical process that we sort of build on every day. So even something that seems like a little thing, I mean, what are the masses if not millions of little things that can sometimes become a very big problem? So
yeah, and
there's nothing that's not worth doing. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing is a failure. Nothing is, like I said earlier on, like nothing is a failure until every communist is dead. Like,
and even then, it's not genetic, so there's going to be a new generation after a while of them anyway.
Exactly.
We're not going away till we win. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, I guess I should have the first answer I should have given as far as like how do what do I do to be ready for the next one that shows up? Get a gun. I don't know. Train yourself on how to use firearms. Find like here in Seattle, there's the John Brown Gun Club. Find a leftist gun organization that will help you train how to safely use firearms outside of the typically sort of conservative gun culture.
Yeah, you should do stuff like that with a group, especially if you're gonna go to a protest or anything. It's generally not a great idea to just roll up on your own armed. You want to be part of something.
Yeah, you don't want to be the only person with an AR-15.
Yeah, that's not going to be great, and you're probably just going to get arrested right away. So you got to be part of something.
Yeah.
Also, if you're British, if you live in the UK like myself, then obviously that's not really an option, but self-defense is still important. You should... obviously not everyone's able to do so, but if you can, just try to stay in shape to some degree and try to take and stay in shape doesn't mean skinny. It means able to carry your weight, right? And just try to, maybe some self-defense classes, even little things. Because when shit does kick off here, if you are unfortunate enough to find yourself in danger, it's probably not going to be a shootout. It's probably going to be a stupid brawl with some fucking drunk EDL dads or something. So, prepare for what's appropriate for where you live.
Yeah. And generally, you just the advice of you don't want to do anything alone. you want to part of the point of like treating your friend group as like your own sort of affinity group is so that you have this mutual understanding of like we don't do things alone.
Yeah.
And so we have each other's back, and you gotta be ready to defend each other.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And I really like what you said about understanding that like the current like group of people you know and have relationships with are, you're already part of a group.
Yes.
And I would say even beyond that, I would really encourage people to join something like, maybe it's like a leftist gun club, maybe it's a Food Not Bombs, maybe it's a local socialist org, but just expand the group of people who you know and you trust and are at least somewhat on the same page as you. Because then, if a CHAZ 2.0 happens tomorrow, you know more people, you're better established in the local like left, and you've got more connections, and that's kind of the foundation of what like a political movement is made of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than that, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say before we call it a night?
I don't know. If there's no more questions, I don't know. I think everybody should be paying attention to, especially Portland right now.
Yeah.
But also like Atlanta yesterday, they burned down an ice facility.
An ice facility.
Or there was an office owned by ICE that
right.
like got like burned and it looked pretty good. They were breaking glass and stuff. But I don't know. I think generally now is the time to evaluate and watch the moment and see where things are likely to happen and get ready.
I think that's sound advice for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've just also been sort of keeping an eye on the chat. There's some good stuff in there. Kai says that implicit trust is the hardest thing to build, and I definitely agree with that. I think that's a big part of it, and a big part of why you should, begin with the people you already have that with. That's definitely huge. Ice is overrated. Make it hot as balls. Absolutely. So before we go, do you have anything you want to plug? What do you got going on? If I remember correctly, you're something of a YouTubist yourself.
Yeah. I have my YouTube channel. It's called Let's Talk About Stuff. I haven't uploaded a video in a hot minute, but I am actually working on one right now. Not about anything related to this. I'm talking about Knives Out, the movie.
Awesome.
And I hopefully that my plan is to have that video out before the end of this month. The project that's going to be after that will be an essay about CHAZ, which will basically cover a lot of the same stuff that we talked about here. And I'm then going to adapt that into a video.
Great.
But yeah, that's Let's Talk About Stuff on YouTube. And then I'm on Twitter at HMSNoFun, which that's where you can get links to all of the other stuff that I do, because I'm on podcasts and various things. I'll be relaunching my podcast soon under a new name. It used to be Trans Questioning. I'm relaunching it as Gender Punk because I have answered more or less all of my own questions, and now I'm just angry.
I feel it.
Yeah, so that's where it's going to be. Hopefully that'll be coming out soon, and things will be. I've been kind of inactive for a bit, but I'm starting to get the engine turning again. But yeah, that's where you can find all my stuff.
That's great. If you ever want people to come on and be fucking angry about gender with you, hit me up, because I am literally always fuming, mate.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. I love talking to you, Kate. You're always fun to talk to.
No, yeah, likewise. And I also hope that this conversation helped with the process that we'll be putting all of this into writing for your essay as well. I know that talking things out can help.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's already there's already been a bunch of stuff that's been like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Good. Before we go, you said that you were watching a load of Black Panther documentaries. Is there any particularly good one that you would recommend?
The one that I just watched was I think it's just called Black Panther by what the French filmmaker. Why can't I remember her name? It's not Agnieszka Holland. Oh, my brain! I hate my stupid brain.
I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
No. It's okay. Hold on, because it's on Criterion. What's her name? Agnes Varda. There we go. Agnes Varda has like a 25-30 minute Black Panther documentary that she made in the late 70s, I think. Maybe earlier than that, I can't remember. But it's sort of a look on the ground that it's not a very well, I don't want to say it's not a political documentary, but it tries to take a hands-off view and just sort of show like protests it's called Black Panthers 1970 by Agnes Varda. It's a short film that's just sort of showing people on their day-to-day lives and like showing Black Panther organizing, which I found to be illuminating. What is this? There's this YouTube channel that I found recently.
It sounds like that documentary is exactly the sort of thing I was hoping it would be, because I was just going to say I think that the Panthers, in a lot of ways, are a blueprint for the sorts of things that people should be doing. Yeah,
absolutely.
So learn about the Panthers. That's my recommendation to everyone. Check out that documentary.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel that I found recently that is just uploading leftist films. Ooh. And like a lot of them are documentaries. I have to track it down, but they've had a couple of things about like a lot of these are like contemporary documentaries from the late 60s and 70s and 80s that are about leftist moments in history. Oh, excuse me, and they're really good. Where is this? I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right if you can't find it now. If you whenever you do find it, I can post it in like the Discord and stuff. I think a lot of people here are either in there or follow us on Twitter. So if I put it in the Discord and tweet it, then probably everyone will get it.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of films that are just on YouTube now that are like great chronicles of American leftism that really like you could probably just pick a name from leftist history and just sort of like type that into YouTube and find like a documentary from the 70s about it. And the more information, the better. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always a big proponent of like reading political theory, but I also want to say learn our history also, because that is the bit where you see what people actually went out and did and see what worked. And then what maybe you should think about doing going forward. So yeah, documentaries about people who went out and actually did shit, we love it. Especially something like the Panthers, because it's pretty contemporary. Like, it has been a while, but still it's a lot more similar to our current conditions than like the Russian Revolution or something. So there's a lot of important stuff.
Yeah, and we've been, there's been a largely successful attempt by the liberal establishment to erase that history from public consciousness.
Yeah, never let them. Fuck that.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's a good idea for people to sort of refresh their memory of this stuff or learn about it at all, because it is easy to feel like, oh, it couldn't happen here, but no, it already has.
Yeah.
And it's so much of the problem that we're facing is breaking through people's sense that things are not possible. And like, as soon as you show them, oh, it actually is possible, then you start cascading into the cool zone faster and faster. Once you break through that illusion that the state hegemony is just too strong, we can't break it. That's when the cool zone really starts to hit.
Oh, fuck yeah. That is a fantastic point for us to end the stream on. So
found it.
Yeah,
just
boom.
In time.
You found it. All right, drop it in the chat.
It's called Solidarity Cinema.
Solidarity Cinema. That's a good name.
Yeah. They've got a lot of good documentaries on there. They also have a film from 1966 called Daisies, which was produced under the very brief socialist Czechoslovakia. It's an hour-long film about two women basically going out of their way to steal the money of rich white guys.
Sick.
And it is one of my favorite films ever. But yeah, lots of good like Black Panther documentaries and stuff like that. So it's a good channel.
Fantastic. All right, check out that channel. I am definitely gonna be bookmarking that one. And yeah, follow Sarah on Twitter at HMSNoFun. And I'll thank you so much for coming, Sarah, and for taking a few hours to talk to me about this. And
thank you for.
Yeah, of course, anytime. And for everyone else, I'll see you in the cool zone. Peace.
Bye.